Hello, MMA fans. This is Jason Burgos for Sherdog.com, and I am joined by a true legend of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. He was a 2019 UFC Hall of Fame inductee for his travails as a middleweight champion and legendary showdowns with Chuck Liddell, Vanderlei Silva, Dan Henderson, Anderson Silva. My goodness. He is now currently a vice president for One Championship and the lead force behind the promotion's One Warrior Series. He is Ohio's own Rich Franklin. Rich, thank you so much for giving me some time tonight. It's truly a freaking honor.
I love listening to that intro. That's way better than an intro I ever would have written for myself. So thank you very much. Thanks for chatting with me.
You're welcome. It's the surreal moment to kind of talk to you. And I just did it back to back. I just talked to Tito Ortiz. I'm talking to you. This is really a Hall of Fame night in terms of interviews for me.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, look, we all know this is going to be way better than an interview.
Wow.
No,
Wow.
Hey, listen, if you put that in there, make sure you edit it right. I like Tito. He's a good guy.
The gauntlet has been laid, so I'll jump right into the first question. Before we get into One Warrior Series, I wanted to ask you about your day-to-day role with One. Many fans of the sport know you work for the promotion, but may not know the details of your role as a VP. Are there many facets to it? Can you expound to me on what you do there? Because I'm sure many people are curious, because you do seem to have a very, very strong influence with a major promotion.
Yeah, I've been working for One Championship now for a little over 6 years, and initially I was still commuting back and forth from Ohio to Singapore, wherever they needed me at the time, and it was such a long commute that I ended up relocating, at least primarily being in Singapore. I still have my home back in Ohio, and I go home frequently, but once the development of once we developed One Warrior Series, that project took it takes all of my time. So all the things that I handled for One Championship prior to this pretty much fell by the wayside. And because initially what I brought into the company was a history, I guess, expertise in this industry. Right. So I was doing a lot of different things here and there. And then once we developed this project, I run this thing completely, and it consumes all my time.
Now, talk to me about, the One Warrior Series. I didn't know a lot about it until I started researching for this interview, because it's an exclusive to the app and it's on YouTube. So it's, not necessarily something like the events that are on a network and TV, partners around the world. Firstly, for folks that are unfamiliar with it, how did it all come together originally? Because I believe this is season 4 going into season 5 with the show.
Yeah, we're actually in the middle. We're in the middle of filming season 6.
Okay.
So, and of course, by the time we do post and all that kind of stuff, it'll be a while until this is complete. I mean, we still have quite a bit of filming to do for that season, but yeah, we're putting the finishing touches on season 5 now, and then of course it will distribute out sometime mid to late next year, I'm guessing. So it's funny how this project came about, because Chatri, the CEO of One, comes to me one day and he says, they had a meeting without me attending.
Okay.
The leadership team of the company. I wasn't present. I don't know why. I was somewhere else. I couldn't be there. Okay. I can't remember at the time. But they decided that there was this really cool project they wanted to do. They didn't quite have a name for it, but it was the One Warrior Series. And then they all took a vote and decided that I would be the perfect candidate to run this project. Okay. So Chatri comes to me, and it was his idea. The framework of this whole thing was his idea. He and since then there have been a lot of tweaks and things that I and my team have added to it. But he comes to me and he says, "Okay, I want you to think about this kind of like an Anthony Bourdain travel show, and you're going to recruit talent." And he kind of explains the whole framework to me. And he says, "And I want you to lead this project." And I looked at him and I said, "Absolutely not." I had so many things I was doing for the company at the time, and I couldn't put another thing on my plate. And he just smacked me on the shoulder and then walked away. He just looks at me and goes, "You're going to do great, man."
Wow.
And as he was walking away, I was like, "Hey, wait a minute. I just said no." And so, this is the project that I was assigned. And when I was given this project, everything else quickly fell by the wayside, because it became apparent quite quickly how much this was going to consume my time. Right. And truly, he was a visionary on this entire project, because I'll explain how the whole project works in its entirety. We run a travel show, my team and I have a co-host on the show, Jonathan Fong. And we travel and we recruit talent. And we can recruit talent several ways. We can hold a tryout. We can see some film on somebody, or somebody may write in and contact us, or we hear about something and attend a promotion. There are many ways that we can recruit. And we typically travel to a location, meet the athlete, decide whether we're going to recruit them or not, and then tell their backstory. And it will be a story about whatever their story is. And there's usually some sort of cultural element to it, how it relates to martial arts and, their training, their life, the lessons they've learned, or something like that. And and we tell these stories. And there are a lot of stories of obviously people overcoming great odds, but not every story is that way. We recently did an episode with a gentleman whose father had committed suicide.
Wow.
And it was a very, very touching episode. And so it's nice because in one episode we may be telling a story that's very emotionally sensitive like that. In another episode, we may be telling a story where, about somebody who had to overcome just the greatest odds, or grew up in extreme poverty, particularly on this side of the planet. When you meet somebody that, grew up on the outskirts of Manila or something like that in the Philippines. And sometimes we might be doing something crazy like jumping out of a plane or something like that. So it varies from episode to episode, but the beauty is that we get to meet these athletes, tell their stories. That's a double-edged sword, because you become emotionally connected to all these people when you hear about their backstories and what they've been through in life. And it's difficult to not root for them when they're competing. And so when you have, when you've spent time in the hometown of two different athletes, and now they're in the ring competing against each other, you're sitting there like, oh gosh, man, I hate to see either of these two guys, lose. But you have that portion of it where we travel around, we create a television show, and then on top of it, we take these athletes and I have my own roster. One Warrior Series has its own roster of athletes. We're somewhere maybe between 125, 150 athletes just on our roster. Yeah.
So that's what the One Warrior Series event, because I know there's one coming up on December 4th, right?
Yeah, 4th. Okay. Yeah, the next one is December 4th. So what happens is, as we travel around and we recruit these athletes, we take all of these athletes, and then the One Warrior Series has 6 events a year. So our next one is on December 4th, and then the following one is in late February. And we'll do 6 events a year, and they compete against each other. And as they're competing, they're essentially competing for a contract and one championship.
So it's pretty much similar. It's almost on even a bigger stage, because it's similar to, say, Dana White's Contender Series, where they get the contract and stuff like that. But this is like a full-on event, not like a small kind of venue like they do in the Contender Series. This is like a full-on event. It's like often an off branch of one championship, and they get to compete at a high level. And the contract's what is it, $100,000 contract, right?
It's more than 100. It's over $100,000, but yeah, it's 100,000. We just say 100,000 plus. But the math works out to 120, maybe 130. It's 120, 125. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, it's more than 100K. But yeah, it's the project. It's a great ecosystem, because you're going out, you're telling stories, you're creating these television episodes, and then you're also using these athletes to in turn compete against each other. So you're building the stories and telling the stories of these athletes as they're coming up through the organization, and then of course earning spots in one championship. And as of right now, the events that we do are the One Warrior Series events are closed door events. They're not public events where we sell tickets or anything like that. And I prefer it that way, because it's just a much easier event to run. But it is a closed loop system. And from One Warrior Series, some of the standouts so far that we've had that have been passed through to one championship are like Stan Fairtex has come through our organization. She actually showed up at our first tryout in Bangkok, and Jonathan and I were sitting there at our booth watching 2 people try out, and she was on deck. I didn't know she was on deck, but we're sitting here watching this tryout, and suddenly we just hear the shin crash into these Thai pads. It just sounded like a shotgun blast. And I'm just sitting there like this, watching my tryout, and as soon as I hear this, wow, I'm like, what was? Sorry, I just got a call.
That's the problem.
As soon as I hear this shotgun blast go, I turn and look to my right, and there's this girl kicking the pads. Wow. And immediately, I don't even remember who was trying out at that time. She immediately grabbed my attention, and I was just like this the whole time. Uh, and I looked at John, and both of us knew right away that we need to pick that girl up.
Nice.
So I knew that she was going to be a standout star. And then there are other people. We had Daesun Park now, who climbed up the ranks and won Warrior Series, is 3-0 and won championship. He tried out for us in Korea. I wouldn't say that he was a dark horse, but when I saw him try out, I knew he was a talented athlete, which is why I picked him up, obviously. But every time he competes, he just gets better and better. And I see him compete all the time. And then recently we promoted Lito Adewang through from one Warrior Series into one championship, and I'm really expecting big things from him as well. So it's really a blessing when you see the athletes that you have recruited starting to come through into one championship and the success that they're having. Because I always tell my team, I said, we're here to tell great stories of these athletes, like tell their stories. But at the same time, if I can 5 years from now watch a one championship event and every championship bout on the card, it has a one Warrior Series athlete in it, then we're doing our job.
Now, and what's interesting is I talked to James Krause recently. He talked about how coaching has been very fulfilling for him in a lot of ways, more so than fighting. Going from that conversation with Chatri where you said no, up until now, so many going into working on the sixth season and all these different events, has this become, telling these people's stories and seeing them fulfill their dreams, has it become one of the more fulfilling things of your athletic career?
I think so, because you got to keep in mind, I went to university to be a high school teacher, and so I have this kind of innate draw towards, I don't know, educating people, helping people, whatever. I think if I was not a professional athlete, maybe I would have ended up being a life coach or something like that. That seems to be a popular type of. I really don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
But maybe I would have done something like that. But yeah, it is. And this project for me on a personal level, it's great because I like meeting the athletes. And I'm not only telling the stories. We get to go there and we get to train with people, and we get to see things that I've never seen before.
Right.
I mean, I've traveled enough now that it's quite difficult to get me to say like, whoa, I've never seen that. But I can remember the first time I was in Myanmar and I saw a Lethwei match. And and for anybody that's familiar with that sport, for example, headbutting is legal.
Yep.
And so
and no gloves, only just wraps.
Yeah, they use wraps. And much like the Western world, who wasn't ready to see somebody get punched on the ground in a mixed martial arts event, say 25, 30 years ago, whatever, it's even when you come from a mixed martial arts background and you see somebody throw that head in there, you're kind of like, whoa. But as you understand the sport a little more, you're really not so shocked by it. And so it's cool because I'll learn about these sports. I'll learn about different cultures. I see different things, and I get to see them from a perspective that I wouldn't even get to appreciate the same way if I was just, say, a tourist.
Right.
Because typically you're traveling to somebody's house and they're showing you the ins and outs of what life is really like.
Right.
But on top of that, as you recruit these athletes, you get to see them grow in the organization, and you get to see them succeed. And when you hear the stories of people and the kind of things that they're sacrificing, I mean, it's the same thing. It was the same thing for me. I sacrificed a bunch in order to pursue a career in mixed martial arts, and it paid off for me, thankfully. But when you see what people are sacrificing, you really become invested in this project in so many different ways. On the one hand, I get to do these amazing things from a personal standpoint. On the other hand, I'm helping people out. We're telling their stories, and then we're running a promotion at the same time. So I'm still involved in the industry, and I just God has blessed me with a good post-athletic career.
Now, you mentioned that, because I've talked to people from like Combate and stuff like that, and they have scouting where they, go to different countries and stuff like that and find talent, and it's important for them. They're not the UFC where the talent comes to them and presents themselves like, here, we want to be a part of this. But I love that you guys do that. You go tell the stories too. But like you mentioned, Stan Fairtex came from one Warrior Series. Do you feel throughout this process, now you're so far down the line, has this become an important, hub for identifying new talent for one, and it really is a key factor. Just like the Ultimate Fighter, just like the Contender Series is for the UFC, it really is developing some of the big time stars of the future for one championship.
Oh, for sure. I think I'm almost certain that Chachi recognized that from the beginning. That this would not only be a great way to tell stories, but at the same time identify. Right. I guess twofold when I go into a country. Number one, we're going in, and I teach seminars. Oftentimes, I'm teaching seminars, and you go into places sometimes where mixed martial arts may be a new thing, or an understanding of, say, for example, like freestyle wrestling or something like that. And so you're going in and you're helping develop martial arts on a grassroots level, but at the same time, it is a great recruiting tool and of recognizing talent, because what ended up happening when you create One Warrior Series is now you have a division that's specifically designed to go get talent. Right. That's my sole job, is like, let's go find some talent. And when you think about it, it's like, well, who better for that role than I obviously have experience in competition. So I should be able to recognize. Yeah. If I can't recognize some talent, we have a problem. Yeah. This is something that's going to, it's quite valuable to the company. And I think as you see time pass, you're going to see many more One Warrior Series athletes in one championship that had their start in One Warrior Series. And really, the martial arts community here, they're starting to see that happen. Right. Right away. It's interesting. I had one of my athletes. I remember this was, I don't know, the first or second tryout. The whole organization hadn't even really been established yet. Of course, you had the brand of One Championship behind it. Right. But I had one athlete that told me one time, he said, yeah, we saw the tryout for this and we didn't know if it was legit or not, like how, what this was going to be about. And then he looked at me straight up, and this is the kind of responsibility I have to these athletes. He said, but I knew that if your name was attached to it, that it was reputable. Right. And I internally, I was like, wow. And so, when I'm running this project, oftentimes I think probably a little bit too much to my demise. I think like an athlete rather than a promoter, because that's where I came from. Yeah. And I'm dealing with athletes all the time. And so, but, make no mistake about it. That's kind of the ethos of One Championship anyway, is that, the athlete is first.
The show has gone, from what I've seen, from many parts of Asia to find talent. But a key question is, the series, will it eventually go west? Of course, American fans of fighters would be interested in tryouts here, but what about One Warrior Series Europe, Brazil, South America in general? Is that a possibility at some point in the future?
Yeah, we've now traveled to Australia, New Zealand, India, and we're getting ready to. We just came back from Korea. We're getting ready to go to Pakistan. Actually.
Nice, interesting.
Yeah.
Is there a burgeoning MMA, culture in Pakistan?
Well, we have actually on my roster. I have a few Pakistani athletes. Okay. And so I'm going to go up there and tell their stories. And it, interestingly, growing up in the United States, I'll just say that I kind of had this preconceived idea, this notion of what I thought Pakistan was like. Yeah. And we've done a lot of research into the country, and it's nothing like what I thought it would be. And so we're gonna, for example, we're heading up to the northern part of Pakistan in Hunza, and it's one of the top 5 most beautiful places in the world, ranked. And I actually have a team on ground right now doing some research, and they're sending back videos and photos, and it's just unbelievable, the thing. So I'm really excited to do that. And to answer your question more directly, the project it's going to continue growing, and we're going to continue reaching out. Now this is both a plus and a minus for me, because it's nice being able to just jump on a plane and fly just a couple hours from Singapore to go recruit some talent. And suddenly, if we fast forward, I may find myself having to fly to some area of Brazil and getting on a plane for 30 hours to do the same job I can do just, right over the river here. Right. It'll be, like I said, a double-edged sword. It'll be cool, but at the same time, man, these flights, this travel, I think I said this in one of my when we were recording the narrative, the voiceover for the last season maybe, and we traveled over 25,000 miles for the
Wow.
for season 5.
Wow.
And it's just flights, and when you think about it, places like Bangkok, it's not that far from Singapore or whatever.
Right.
So it's a lot of traveling. So yeah, my team we're both excited to expand to places like Europe and the Americas, North and South America, but at the same time we're like, wow, this is going to make things really difficult.
All right, so and now I have a lot of just one related questions for you because you are an important person in the organization. You're vice president. For a long time until recently, the one hydration protocols was a rather mysterious undertaking, and there were always a lot of rumors about what happened. However, now they are starting to air them live. You have been with the company for some time, like you mentioned, almost 6 years. Why was it
Yeah.
such a secretive process, do you think, for so long? And do you see it being the hydration protocols? Because I've talked to Alex Davis, and he's a big believer in it too. Do you see this maybe being the future of maybe weight cutting in the West eventually at some point?
It should be. It doesn't. I mean, first of all, the hydration protocol was never secretive, because it's not.
Well, it
I
was
mean,
never
there's
public. They never really told people too
yeah. Well, but
much.
I think when you develop it, you never really think like, oh, we need to make this public either,
Mm.
right? I mean, you don't think about it, and then it's yeah, for whatever reason, there's nothing to hide. So the athletes, for example, have always had the ability to watch their opponent weigh in and watch their hydration. They can send a representative from their camp. They've always been able to do that. It's always been an open door policy and all that kind of stuff. I think just recently we've just started broadcasting it just to the public. I don't know if we ever really thought the public would have been interested. I'm not really sure, but it should be the future of how the weigh-in process should be. When I think about my career as an athlete. Initially, I wasn't cutting weight. When I came into the scene, I was competing at 205, and this was before there was a middleweight class in the UFC, for example. There was no middleweight champion. They created the middleweight class, and then Evan Tanner had competed against Dave Terrell to be the first middleweight champion. And so Evan had the belt, and then of course that was about at that time when they created the weight class. I had considered, like, as soon as I knew about the creation of that weight class, I thought, well, I think I can make this weight. I didn't grow up wrestling, so I didn't know a whole lot about weight cutting in that process. And I had to learn all of that at that time. And fortunately, I was surrounded by very intelligent people, because even within a system of cutting weight, there's a smart way to do it.
Yeah.
Like, let's call it the healthiest way possible, even though it's not healthy.
Yeah.
And then there are very stupid ways to go about it. And so I was fortunately surrounded by people that knew what they were doing. But when I look back at my career and you look at some of the medical research on what dehydrating does to the body, particularly to the brain cavity, and the brain cavity, for example, is the last piece of the body to rehydrate when you're rehydrating. And so when you're in a sport that involves possible concussions and you're cutting weight on top of it, you're leaving the brain even more susceptible. And as I think about that and I look back at my career, I'm like, man, I didn't know any better. Right. And so here you have an organization like One Championship that's very forward thinking on this, and the athlete safety is the priority of this organization. So if other organizations in the world wouldn't align with some similar type of weight, I won't call it weight cutting policy, but a weigh-in policy. It's crazy, because like when I was competing, for example, the weigh-in itself was its own event for me. It was as stressful, if not more stressful sometimes, than the actual competition, than the actual fight. And so, our athletes, it's awesome seeing them walk around during event week. They're eating breakfast, they're drinking water, they're hydrated, they're on natural weight, and I think that it overall is a good payoff for the performance of the athletes. I think they just perform better as well. So yeah, I mean, it should be the future.
I mean, the impetus for even one doing the change was somebody unfortunately, passed away doing a weight cut. And in the West, more so here in this country, more so than maybe any, bad things need to happen before the change comes. Do you fear that may happen here in North America? Some UFC fighter may die before someone gets the message, okay, weight cutting needs to be changed?
Well, look, it's just unfortunate in any situation in life if there's to have something where like an event that necessitates the change, right?
Yeah.
So you're better off being proactive. That's
Right.
all. I mean, that's always a no-brainer. So, you see, you can see in the you can see little pockets of movements in the Western world where the the idea of weight cutting and the philosophy of it is beginning to change. So I believe it's moving in the right direction, and I believe that one championship is the fact that we've done this, that we're grabbing the attention of people and saying, hey, wait a minute, it can actually be done this way. The years and years of the way that boxing has done things, it doesn't need to be done that way. So I believe we're at the beginning of a movement, honestly.
All right. Well, and I have one more question. It's a tougher question. It's a question we talked about on the Sherdog podcast and stuff like that, because sometimes there's been issues in terms of like what the media wants to know about one championship and their drug testing and stuff like that. And there was a picture that made the rounds on the web of you handling specimens for like drug testing and stuff like that instead of saying a WADA official. What do do you feel, and it's a question because there's always a bad reputation about drug testing in Asia, and this goes back to pride and all that stuff, and it's not a great look lately for one, and I've talked to Chatri Youngtang about this. I've asked about this. Could you comment at all maybe about that picture and shed some light on the drug testing for one, because I want one to do well. I want every promotion to do very well, and that's always the issue here in the West. And shed some light on the drug testing if you know of it and how they use the WADA protocols to do it. Do you have information on that yourself?
No, that's part of the athletic competition team. So remember when I said initially that when I was hired for one, I handled a bunch of different things,
right.
And at the time we were setting up the hydration protocol.
Okay.
That was one of the things that myself and Matt Hume spearheaded that, and I helped out Matt because Matt leads the competition team. And so the picture that circled the internet was actually us doing hydration testing. That's what that was.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it was like I'm not qualified by any means to do any kind of drug testing. Right.
Okay.
I'm sure that I'm a smart guy, so I'm sure that it probably wouldn't be a difficult thing to figure. But yeah, I'm not that guy.
So why wouldn't one get out in front of that, and just get out the message? That's a hydration protocol. What do you guys? There's no nothing to see here.
Yeah, I don't know. I never really I never really chased that. I didn't even know. I honestly, I didn't even know that picture was that people were talking like that I was handling some sort of drug testing procedure. I never even knew that. I thought everybody understood that we were setting up the hydration protocol at the time, and that was me helping out. We were actually, it was a urine specimen, and we were using a refractometer to test the specific gravity of the urine. Like that's how we do our hydration testing. So yeah, I had nothing to do with the drug testing side of things. So if there were actually discussions about that, you're breaking news to me.
See, and that's the thing. That's why I say it feels like, in a way, they've been secretive. And I know, I get what you're saying too, that you didn't feel a need to show hydration protocols, but because there's a lack of it, we haven't seen it. We're so used to the UFC style. We are uninformed on knowing that is a hydration test. We don't know the process on a detailed level. So, but I'm glad I asked you, and I'm glad you clarified for me, and I appreciate that. Now, I have some topics. You gonna say something?
No, I was just going to say, listen, just to kind of educate you on the hydration protocol, it's a real simple process. The athletes, we use an instrument to test the specific gravity of the urine.
And it's multiple days, right? It's like 3 days or so leading up to the weigh-in.
Yeah. So essentially what you do is you have your athlete, they go and they, when they show up for their weigh-in, they have to pee, then their urine is checked with, it's just simple, you dip a stick and this instrument into the urine, and it'll give you a readout. And what what this instrument does essentially is it tells you how many particles, so to speak, are in the urine. And it has, like, the more diluted it is, in essence, the more hydrated you are.
Okay.
And so what it does on the bare basics, you don't like to try not to get too scientific, but it just tests the hydration of things. And so you have to be below a certain marker. If you're below that marker, then you step on the scale, and you have to be on weight as well. And we do that over a 2-day period prior to the event, and you have to make both weight and hydration.
What happens if someone is hydrated but they're not on the designated, because they're supposed to be at a certain amount of weight away, they're allowed away from their opponent, right? There's a gap they can be within. But what if they're not in that gap? What happens next?
So, okay, if you're not hydrated 100%, you cannot compete.
Okay.
It's just company protocol. Like, that's athlete safety, number one. If you're hydrated but you happen to miss weight, right, then you can negotiate a catch weight.
Okay.
And of course, your opponent, everything that's all done with the competition team. So if you miss hydration, you can't fight. If you miss weight, it's still possible that you can do a catch weight as long as you're hydrated. So did I answer your question?
Yes, actually, brilliantly, because so many people will think, and they'll hear things and hearsay, and somebody will say, oh, well, they went behind the back door and they made a deal or whatever. But now I'm understanding if, the parameters things need to be in, and then catch weights are agreed to. So it makes a lot more sense, and there's a lot more clarity. And I wish there were more people like you from one that said stuff like this and would talk about it openly and so detailed. And I really appreciate that. So I won't ask any more about that. I asked topics about MMA because getting opinions from a UFC Hall of Famer, a former UFC champion, is important. It means something. It matters to people. Now, I wanted to ask you about, firstly, as the guy that has been a part of this industry for such a long time, what are your thoughts on a fighter union? Are you for it? Are you indifferent? Because I've talked to a few managers about it, and they don't see it happening. They don't think it's realistic. How do you think? Because I want to know, how do you think we can get to a place where fighters can get a much greater share of the revenue pie, but also have pensions and health insurance, for life after fighting, say like the NFL does?
Yeah. Listen, I'm just going to talk about unions in general, because I have mixed feelings on unions. Sometimes I think they're a good idea, and sometimes I think they're a bad idea. This is not as it applies to the athletic world necessarily. Right. So please don't take any of my quotes here out of context.
And I agree with you.
Because it's like, man, the moment I open my mouth, my intentions are good, and I'm one of those guys who I speak freely, and then suddenly you take a portion of what I say. But I recently watched on Netflix a documentary called American Factory. Have you seen it?
No, I don't know that one.
Yeah, and so it was all about unions and stuff like that. And so when I think about unions, and you got to keep in mind, I was a high school teacher, and we have unions, we have state unions involved in that. And when I look at how unions mix with corporations, it's a double-edged sword. A union is. There are ways where it can protect an employee, make sure that they're getting, for example, like a fair wage, or they're not being overworked or something like that, or their overtime rates and whatnot. But at the same time, unions can also create situations where there's I don't know, just imbalances in things that it just doesn't make sense from a business perspective. And even in the Netflix documentary, that's what they were talking about. Like, well, if that company had to use a union, then they would just shut down. And so, when you look at a union from both sides, like, there are pros and cons, and I think for each person, it's different, and it weighs things out. As unions apply to the sports world, I really don't have an opinion on the matter. It's like, if that's your fight and you want to be in that, I've had several people approach me about it, and listen, it would be nice for me to have retired and had a pension plan or health care for life, right? And I don't know where that cutoff is, like how many matches or how many years you have to compete for an organization where you have where you're entitled or feel like you should be entitled to those things. I don't know. It would be nice, But at the same time, I always say this: I made way more money competing than I would have made teaching. And during my career, I was smart with my money. I didn't spend it on frivolous, stupid things.
Yeah.
And so
Yep.
I've done my due diligence and saved my money for things like a pension and making sure that I'll be able to have health care moving on down the line and stuff like that. And so, if that's somebody else's fight, then they can fight that fight.
Do you think it's less about the term, say, union, and it's more about just some kind of body, be it an alliance of managers or something, that just collectively bargain? Is that maybe what it is? Just set guidelines that everybody agrees to, and then union, whatever, everybody's on the boat. As long as there's a set thing that we get this amount, they get this amount. Would that be what it is?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I always. All right, I'm going to talk philosophy with you for a second. So this is, please don't take my quotes out of context, but it's kind of like how in the States you pay into Social Security, right?
Right.
There's a certain amount of money that's paid into a pot, and then that money has to be managed, and it's managed by quite a bit of people. So there's those management fees. In the end, you're going to end up having less money going out than you had put in, because some of it gets chewed up by management fees. So when it comes to programs like this, just the sheer numbers alone, like you have to depend on, when you look at something like Social Security, you have to depend on not everybody taking out who put in, right? Like, unfortunately, I don't know, maybe like you're kind of playing the odds. Like some of these people will end up passing away before they can pull Social Security. And it's the same. Anytime you have somebody negotiating on your behalf, well, it takes money to get those people to do that. So pieces of that money is going to disappear, and not everything gets returned back to the athlete, for example.
Right.
So, I don't know. I guess like, if there was something that I would to say about unions as an athlete, I'd say it's just one of those things where I can see the pros and cons, and I don't know. I really haven't done enough research on that to truly weigh in with an intelligent opinion. And so before I took a hardline stance on one side or another, like I would really sit down, if that was going to be the fight that I wanted to fight or not fight, I would sit down and do my due diligence before I joined the crusade.
Fair enough. Now, one has worked to build a reputation where their fighters aren't just athletes. As Chatri has told me, they are global heroes, and the tenets of honor and respect are big for one. While for the UFC and a lot of Western promotions, they seem to lean even more these days to boxing style, promoting trash talk, social media driven beefs, BMF titles. Where do you think we should be as a sport personally? Is one right? Is UFC giving what people want, maybe? Or should we try to find somewhere in the middle where it seemed like the sport was like 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah. Let me tell you a story. When I had the discussion with Chatri, when he came to me with this idea about the One Warrior series and creating this television show, this is a recruiting tool, don't get me wrong, but the idea of this television show for Chatri is the precursor of an idea where he believes that when the athletes who compete in one are finished competing, he wants to find something for them to be able to do. And whether that's like content or whatever it is, our organization is one of these organizations that views the athletes as like, it's like, you've brought them into the organization. One, you have time and invested in them, but two, they're kind of like family as well.
Right.
And so this is not an organization where when you get cut, like after your career is over, it's like, well, thanks for your service, goodbye. Right. It's like, well, okay, we've invested all this time in this athlete, and they've invested all their time in this organization. So how can we continue to use them? And I think that if you look at some of the web series and things that we put out, and commentators and everything across the board, we use as many of our athletes as possible for these things. And so that's kind of how we view things with the athletes, is that they're part of a family. Now, I don't know. I didn't really answer your question though. So ask me the question again, Jason. I want to make sure that
I think I know where you're going, but just the idea of the promoting style is what do you prefer? One's kind of really tradition, honor, respect, maybe not too much sass. UFC's overly sass, or should we be somewhere in the middle?
I don't know. I think I think the fans will call for the demand.
That's true. Yeah,
And
that's true.
and you know, I'll say this: the way that we promote, it seems that our fan base is very receptive to it. And when you look at how much our fan base has increased, and just everything from our
Yeah.
content consumption and stuff like that, we're doing something right,
Right. Exactly.
you know. And so, I'll just leave it at that.
Now, with I'm glad you brought it up early in terms of you having you were trying to do both, Singapore, Ohio, then you ended up uprooting, going to Singapore, most of the year. What has that transition been like to uproot? Be in Singapore, because I mean I've talked to a lot of one fighter stuff like that. What I've been told, Singapore is a beautiful place. English is a major language there. Is
Yeah.
that as easy a transition as anyone from Ohio can make to Asia?
Yeah, I would say. I mean, well, first of all, look. I mean, I'm from Ohio. I'm from the Midwest. I come from a high school where probably 90+% of the people that I graduated with still live within a 30-minute driving radius of the high school, right?
Uh-huh.
So, and Midwesterners are not known for working internationally, but I've done quite a bit of travel in my competition. I've done a
Right.
lot of stuff with the U.S. military overseas. I've probably at this point in time been to maybe just slightly north of 50 countries.
Wow. Wow.
So I got a lot of stamps on my passport. I've seen a lot of things, and for me on a personal level, I'm constantly fighting these two things where I have this one side of me who is regimented and strict and goes about, like my nutrition, my
Mm-hmm.
workouts. This is who I was as an athlete. Then I have this other side of me who likes to be that guy that can just walk into a jungle and disappear for a week
Okay.
and then come back like, hey guys, I'm back.
Yeah.
So, but the problem is that messes up my training routine and whatnot.
Yeah.
So, I'm constantly at battle with these two things. I'll say this: that if you're transitioning from the Midwest or anywhere like that in the U.S. to somewhere in Asia, this is probably about as easy as a transition as it gets. Singapore is the safest country in the world, probably the cleanest country in the world, the most organized country in the world. The streets here are, I mean, just everything is well maintained, clean, and this place is run in such a way. It doesn't it doesn't feel militant. Don't get me wrong, but it's
Yeah.
run
Yeah.
with military precision,
Right.
right? But it's funny. For example, like I can't go to the store and buy a pack of chewing gum because it's illegal to sell gum in Singapore.
Really? Huh.
Oh, you didn't know this?
My
Yeah.
girlfriend would love that. She hates gum chewing.
Yeah, and so we make a joke about it, but make no mistake about it, it's not some sort of society where you're oppressed. You're free here, and the beauty of a place, and this is not just Singapore. This is most of the places that I've traveled in the world. I'll say this on a personal level: you, as an American, before you travel places, you sit at home and you watch media, CNN, Fox News, and you hear all about just what's going on in the world. And I touched on this earlier when we were talking about me traveling to Pakistan this year and what preconceived notions I had of what I thought Pakistan was going to be like.
Right.
And I haven't been yet, but I mean, it's nothing like what you would think. And I look at how the world works outside of the U.S. I come from a country where we constantly preach freedom, 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 and everybody has their rights. And when I see what's going on in the U.S. right now, and I'm slightly out of touch because I'm on this side of the planet most of the time, but when I see what's going on with Trump being president and how polarized our country is, it's so unsettling to me because I'm on another side of the planet where I'll travel to a country that's 80% Muslim, for example. And the fact that I'm a Christian is of no matter. Like that, and everybody just gets along. And and it's the same way here in Singapore. There are Christians, there are Muslims, there are Hindus, there's all walks of religion, for example. And there are no issues. No issues with people. And it's not because people are afraid to speak out. It's just, this is my thing, that's your thing, and we're cool. People can agree to disagree. We don't see things the same way, but we can still be friends.
Yeah.
And it's not, that's how it should be in the U.S. and it's not that way.
No.
And so,
Nope.
Traveling around the world, it's eye-opening. It's just eye-opening because some of the pillars of what you thought you believed growing up, and things like freedom. When you get outside of the country and you're in a country where you can't buy chewing gum, for example, you realize like you have a lot of freedom. For example, like the freedom of religion, just like you do in the U.S. But people just get along here and things work. And it's not just Singapore. It's all over this side of the planet. And every time I go to a new place, I'm just like, sometimes I think, wow, why doesn't it work like that back home?
Right.
Why don't people just get along like that? And so yeah, for me living in Singapore, well, just that kind of experience on the other side of the planet, and it's not just Asia, man. I mean, I've been to places in the Middle East where it's the same way, and but living here in Singapore is this is about the easiest transition because I still have access to like good training facilities and it's organized, and I'm a very orderly and organized kind of guy. Like that's that math side brain of me that, so traffic laws exist here. Whereas, man, I mean, some places that you travel to, the traffic is in the city. Jakarta has the worst traffic ever.
Oh my goodness.
But yeah, so from that perspective, it's an easy transition. English is the main language. You never have to worry about not having a menu in English and things like that. Like it's easy if you're transitioning that way.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, I have two more questions. I really appreciate the time. Last year, one had a surprising return in Henzo Gracie. I mean, you'd mentioned regimen. You're, the athletic mind. You look in fantastic shape. You look younger than me. Is a return, or even not maybe a return to, but was a return to combat sports ever a possibility? Because it's almost been exactly 7 years since your last fight. Was it ever close? Could it be close? Could it be close in Muay Thai? Could it be close in kickboxing? Does it have to be MMA? Is that possible?
So look, competition is my first love. Right. You look at a guy like Henzo, right?
Yeah.
Henzo comes back to compete. You just can't take that out of a person.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this, that fortunately for me, I retired from competition mentally before I had to physically.
Okay.
I would prefer that. I would prefer to get to a point where I step back and say, you know what, I've had enough of the sport, and it's time to move on and do something different, than to be craving competition every single day of your life, but physically not able to perform the way that you were.
Right.
Now I realize I'm getting older. The caveat to that is that just because I said that I mentally left before, doesn't mean that I don't miss it.
Right.
Doesn't mean that I don't crave it. Doesn't mean that I don't think about it. And yeah, people ask me all the time. Mm-hmm. I have people that approach me. Would you be interested in this? Would you be interested in that? And, in theory, yeah, I would love to. I would love to compete again. I could care less about the glitz and glam and fame and all that junk. Right. And for me, competition was about the camaraderie of my team and my family and my friends, my fans. Because it was, I say this, and I said this in my retirement letter, the competition is like a general uniting his troops marching into battle. And everybody gets behind you, all the way down to the fans, because they're emotionally invested in you. They're invested so much that they'll actually pay money to watch you compete, right? And so when you win, a piece of that victory belongs to everybody, and when you lose, a piece of that loss belongs to everybody as well. They feel it all the same, I mean, you see it in other sporting competitions. Imagine like when your favorite team loses the Super Bowl or something. It's like, oh gosh, that's the worst day ever.
Yes.
And so that's what I miss the most, is this rally cry behind you. I miss being in the gym every day and training with my team. And so am I ever tempted? Absolutely. I think about it all the time. But the reality for me is that I'm running this project, and I handle this thing from A to Z. Yeah. I have a team of amazing people underneath me. Don't get me wrong. This is not just me single-handedly doing everything. Yeah. And so, but we sit down as a team and we select the locations. We develop the stories. We tell. We're the ones that do all the production, both everything from pre-production to production to post-production, and then we run in these live events. And so, in order for me to compete, I would have to step away from this project completely. And I would say that I'm at least, by my standards, even though I train every day and keep myself in good shape, and I mean, we touched base this morning before we did this interview, and I did my morning cardio, and so for me, I'm probably 5 months off of competing at this, by conditioning and training at the standard by which I know that it takes to compete at a top level. So that's kind of the time investment it would be for me. And I'm so involved in this project at this point that every day that goes by that I'm involved in this project is the reality of me fighting, just of me ever actually saying, yes, I definitely want to come out of retirement, is becoming less and less. And I'm not getting any younger. I appreciate the compliment. I would disagree. I don't think I look as young as you, but thank you anyway. But I'm not getting any younger, and trust me, I can feel some of those bumps and bruises. Like, I can feel that now, and I can feel that, and back's a little stiff. So, I realize I'm not 25 anymore.
Right. And now, last question. I appreciate the time. Now, the UFC, or maybe more Dana White, is known for holding grudges. He's held a grudge against Frank Shamrock for a long time. I asked Tito about it earlier. If you've watched the 30 for 30 with him and Chuck, he still holds a grudge against Tito. But for a guy that is a major part of a competing organization, a vice president, were you surprised that you got into the 2019 UFC Hall of Fame this year? Did that surprise you at all? You felt you are still on very good terms with them despite working for one.
Yeah, I never left on bad terms. And I talked to Dana and then Lorenzo for Tito when this job offer was on the table, and they gave me their blessing to work for one championship. So to say was I surprised? Yeah, because I'm over here doing my own thing. I'm climbing mountains and running through jungles and jumping out of planes, and then I get a call one day. It's like, hey, we're inducting you in the Hall of Fame, and that's kind of at this point the furthest thing from my mind, really. Right. Not and so I was surprised because I just wasn't expecting it at the time, but. I'm not saying that I was surprised because there was some sort of grudge or that I thought there was some sort of grudge. No, it's like I said, they gave me their blessing to work here and everything. I've always had. I could pick up the phone now and give Dana a call and just say hello if I wanted to, and I'm sure we would chat for a little while just catching up. So we've always had a good working relationship and never. Yeah, not surprised from the perspective of what you're asking. I grew up dreaming of being a professional athlete, and you never really think about, oh, it would be nice to be a professional athlete. Oh, it would be nice to win a championship, but you never really think like, I'm going to produce the kind of career that will put me in the Hall of Fame one day. Mm-hmm. And when I look at a Hall of Fame induction, like it's like a childhood dream come true, right. And the Hall of Fame induction, it truly is a testament to the team of people, like everybody, all those people that I mentioned before, all the way down to the fans. Right. All those people that really got me to the Hall of Fame, because there's no way I can step inside I could never compete just on my own. I have to have good training partners and good coaches and people that, good managers, people looking out for me and all that kind of stuff. And without those things, I never would have made the Hall of Fame. So when you sit back and you look at that, I'm a very blessed individual.